What up, everybody? My name is Chris, and I am the Authority on Zero, and this is now the podcast, The Authority on Zero. Prior to, it was called Encouragement for the Soul. If you didn't see my TikTok video, the reason I changed it was because so many people were having a hard time finding the podcast Encouragement for the Soul because of the wordplay, the brackets, and all that stuff in it. So I sat on it for a minute, and I just made the executive decision that I was going to change it due to the fact that, ultimately, like let's just be real about it. We want people to be able to find the podcast. I'm called to share my voice and share my message and my ministry, and I don't want to make it difficult for anybody, and I'm not trying to say be braggadocious or anything like that, but I think I have some important things to say and I want to share them with people. So, with that being said, I wanted to make it easier on others to find the podcast. So that's why the podcast is now called The Authority on Zero. So I thank you for those of you who sat and watched Encouragement for the Soul, or listened to it rather, because there was no watch. This is my first video format, and it makes me nervous, but we'll keep going, right? That's part of the reason why I've been gone a little bit, because I've been kind of trying to find my voice still, trying to figure out what it needs to be about, and it just needs to be about me thinking out loud, and it also needs to be, just the raw, honest truth that's been showed to me, and I want to share that with you. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. So yeah, there's a bunch of stuff I want to talk about because there's just been so much. I've been away for a while. So, first I want to talk about where I've been. I've been learning how to deal with anger. It's been an ongoing, consuming part of my life that hasn't felt too great. And I've been praying on it, on trying, how do I get it done? How can I move past it? And that's understanding how my anger works, what my anger feels like, and where it stems from, And I realize that when I become angry, there's a lot of grief attached to that anger. So I have been learning how to honor that grief, which some of it is like ancient grief for me, because it's like I'm 40, and some of it I've been carrying around since I've been like a child, that I didn't realize. I thought like, whatever, or I did the whole push it down thing, and that doesn't work. So that's where I'm at. I've been working consistently on understanding and processing so I can function at a higher format, right? And to be honest with you, it feels good, but at the same time, I feel a little naked because my anger has been what has been my driving force. So there's this great song, from the 80s, and I want to say it's Johnny Rotten, but great song, but in the very last part of the song, he starts screaming, anger is an energy, anger is an energy, but yeah, and it's like, may the moon rise with you. That's kind of how it goes, how the the little melody in the back goes. But it's a great song, by the way. Anyway, yes, so I don't get off on a tangent. But I've been learning about my anger and how my anger is just it's just a cause provided by the symptom. It's a side effect from the symptom, and the symptom is grief. So we're going in there and we're curing the grief, and honoring it, hearing it, and then laying it to rest, and just doing some healing work. And that's pretty important to me. These are words that I don't think that I'd hear myself say if I were to go back like 4 or 5 years ago. Probably 3 to 2 years ago, maybe I wouldn't be talking about this stuff either. So that's where I've been, just doing some patchwork, I guess. Well, also, actually, it's not even patchwork. It's like a full overhaul, if I'm being honest about it. It's a restructure. It's breaking down the foundations that I know and restarting and exposing myself and doing a lot of things that are highly uncomfortable but incredibly necessary. So just yeah, that's where I've been. And let's see what else have I been doing. I've been door dashing. That's been pretty interesting as well, actually. So who would have known a guy that ran some number one stores and for this big company, this big corporation, and did a pretty good job at doing that stuff, and made some pretty good money, would actually wind up loving door dashing. At first, I felt like it could be a little humiliating because I went from such a high place, I guess. I don't know how to really word that, but I guess like I went from um, a higher level job to what I would consider, a basic entry level job. But there's something that I really love about it. It's incredibly enjoyable. So yeah, I'm gonna keep doing it until I get my next big boy job back. But I'm also very selective about that as well, because if you've listened to this, you know that I practice Sabbath, and you know that keeping the Sabbath is incredibly important to me. I'm doing my best to be a biblical Christian. I study with Seventh Day Adventist. I consider myself to be one. I'm a member of the church now. But with that being said, above all, I just want to be a biblical Christian. And that means that I am going to be a Sabbath keeper. And there are a lot of big opportunities that have come my way, even bigger than where I was. And when I mentioned that I practice the Sabbath, it was an immediate no. Uh, which, there it begs the question: are you truly an equal opportunity employer? But just hearing that no was enough for me. No need to argue to be part of their administration. I'd rather just let God lead me. And I know that can drive some of my friends crazy because they, for some reason, think that I won't be taken care of. But the strange part is, I know, actually, it's not strange at all. Actually, I take that back. The beautiful thing is, I know I am taken care of. I'm squared away. I'm A-okay. Um, some people don't share that same sentiment as I do, but that's okay because they don't need to. Um, you know, it's okay for your friends to worry about you. I'm just not worried about it myself. I'm actually really enjoying myself right now, and I'm having fun while I'm excavating myself and truly building a relationship with God like I've never had before. Um, and I know that when I say these things out loud, that can lead to opposition, and that's fine because I know I'm taken care of. So yeah, I'm kind of going around in circles here, but the cool thing about the door dashing thing though is that it has given me the opportunity to share the gospel with guerrilla marketing. So if you don't know what guerrilla marketing is, think of guerrilla warfare. Then there's guerrilla marketing. Just look it up. I'm not going to explain it uh, because I feel like when I explain it, people don't tend to get it. But now I've taken the principles of guerrilla warfare, guerrilla marketing, and I've made what's called I've coined it. I like to think I coined it. I don't think anybody else has. There probably is somebody who's actually said this before, but guerrilla ministry is what I've been working on. Right. So what I do is I got the idea from my buddy Chris, and he was showing me how people make thank you cards, for their door dashing, and I was like, this is pretty awesome, and I wanna use this as a platform to spread the gospel. However, in these times, you never know who's going to be offended or just be super I gotta watch my language, super stanky about it, right? So um I don't need anybody giving me the stank eye or anything like that. So what I've done is I find a verse or two that I love. We extract the message, turn it into a modern. Um, let's just say we kind of put the guise of a worldly message in there. But then what I do is I'll take the passage. So let's just say one of my favorites is Psalm 188:24. Not going to tell it. I'm not going to say it on here. I want you to go look it up. Psalm 188:24. Actually, wait, hold on. I'm wrong. I'm totally wrong. Now I got to look it up. Yeah, it's not. It's not Psalm 188. I messed it up. I feel silly. It's Psalm 118:24. That's okay though. Now I'll read it because I messed it up. I feel like I have to do this now. So this is the day which the Lord hath made. He will rejoice and be glad in it. So that's like kind of something that I've been like really excited about. So I take it, I take that verse, I extract that message, turn it into a more modern, Western looking thing, and then I put like in a green marking, I'll put Psalm 118:24. So I promise I haven't been writing 188. I have no idea why I said 188 either. Like as soon as I started saying it, like I was like, oh, I got this wrong. Anyway, yeah, we're gonna move on from it. But yeah, so I'll put that in there. And so it's surprising like how many thank you messages I get from people, about these cards. Like because like your Dasher can send you a little message if you're not familiar with it. So you can send your Dasher a message, and since I'm the Dasher, like they'll be like, hey, thank you. You have no idea how much I appreciate reading that. Um, you know, so it's awesome. It opens up dialogue between me and the community that I go out and deliver for, which I love. Um, and it gives me the opportunity to pray for those people, to just wish them blessings. I think at this time we all need them anyway. So, and then the part two, bum, 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 bum. And mind you, I get these thank you cards from the dollar store and like from Dollar Tree, right? Because they're $1.25. I get 6 of them, buy a few of them. If somebody ups a tip or something like that, I use that money to fund my ministry, which leads me to the next thing. So something that I found at Dollar Tree, which I think this is really cool. It's not the best quality, but it doesn't matter if it's the best quality. It matters the message, and it's the most important message. Boom. So they have these Bibles, and they're $1.25, right? So, and then if you feel really cool and your Dollar Tree has them, you can spring and get them the highlighters as well for another $1.25, and now they have a Bible that they can rock and roll with. So, which leads me to my next little rant that I want to talk about. So, I've had the opportunity to have a few good conversations about the Bible lately, and this is not something that you just pick up and understand. There's a great deal of reading and studying and community that's involved with this. This isn't something that you do as a lone wolf. This is something that you get your brothers involved with. You share the message and you guys talk about what it means to you, how you guys all interpret it. And then if you got the right crowd of people, which I hope you find, they'll go through and we'll talk about the history, the context, and all this stuff that's going on with what's happening here. And it's just so important to have that community. So when you have a Bible, right? It's all about going in there and just tearing it apart. Not literally tearing it apart. I hope you never do that. But it's about getting in there and reading it and asking all kinds of questions. There's so many questions. There's so many verses in this book that are just like people take them out of context all the time, or they don't understand the context and they use it for a different context, and that's fine, to an extent. but also our jobs are to be loving to one another, and in our correction to be loving toward one another. And I feel that's a place where I failed recently as well. Trying to be corrective and trying to just kind of share where some things are, or what some things mean. Um, but um, that's why growth is so important, and that's why having a deeper understanding of this is important, because this thing is a cure-all for so many problems in life. Um, I'll just jump on a brief little part about this. So understanding anger also means that you understand that you live with something else, because typically there's this symbiotic mess of emotion that tie in with these things. So while sometimes you can seem like a well put together person, you might be drowning in anxiety. And I didn't understand it because I would give it a different name all the time. Like all the time. Oh yeah, it's just a bad day. It was a rough one today. Like whatever little diagnosis I want to give it, that would be how I would rule it, you know. And with that being said, there's a time to just admit, hey, this sucks. There's something wrong, and I need to spend a little bit of moment chewing on it. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. I think I grew up in a time where it was kind of like f your feelings kind of thing. Like as I was turning into a man, that was a big thing that was going on. Like suck it up, princess, those kind of things. So you kind of learned how to do that, and you didn't really address things that were traumatic to you, um, you know. And thank goodness that in my 40s I get the opportunity to do that. I get the opportunity to love on myself and to just be a good man with myself. No longer a nice guy, but a good man. And I'll save that rant for another day. But yeah, so this book helps tremendously with anxiety and with all kinds of other pains. So also you're going to hear some bangs apparently tonight, because my neighbors just want to shoot their guns, and I live out in the country and that's what they do. So, I like to think that they're celebrating the podcast, me coming back out. Uh, I'm not that big of a narcissist. But yeah, there's been that, and then just kind of learning, just being in study, not just with the Bible, with all types of things, with life, observing, reporting, finding, doing the things that I love. Like found out that there is a fact that I used to share that is not a fact at all. It's a complete lie about the butterfly. So when the butterfly goes from there's this ideology that when the butterfly is in the cocoon, the butterfly, from the caterpillar goes into the cocoon before it becomes the butterfly, and in that time it becomes like this big gooey oozy thing. And there is an element of truth to it, because if you cut up in the cocoon you see it. However, the problem is what they're cutting up is, it's not like this primordial ooze thing that the caterpillar becomes and then it changes its cellular structures and all that stuff. Well, it does, but it doesn't become the primordial ooze, but it does change its cellular structures. But yeah, so it's always been a butterfly. It just had to grow into the butterfly. So it never became some ooze and it had to make a choice on, hey, am I going to just die here, or am I going to become a butterfly? It's always been destined to be a butterfly. And that's going to bring me into today's topic, which is restoration. So the beautiful thing about our lives is that restoration has been promised to us from the beginning of time. So if we believe in the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, if we believe that's where God made, with the fall of man, God made the promise of redemption, that's, pretty important in your faith, But also, there's just there's this element of beauty to it, right? Because even though in that moment, our species completely disobeyed and disrespected the Creator, Yahweh still provides, and His grace is so abundant and so vast that, I mean, just in the moment of investigation, this is where a lot of things happen. This is where the first portion of our investigative judgment begins. But in Yahweh's investigation, He immediately promises that there's going to be restoration for the fall of man. He's going to restore everything, and there's a word in Greek that I cannot pronounce, so I'm not going to get into that today. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to challenge you to look up this word and learn all about it, because the word restore, if we look at this, right, and we look at this through a secular lens, it just means that we're going to bring it back to the original status that it was in. And there's an art to that. There's an art to restoration. There's this, now we're going to hear trains too. But yes, so think about the person who restores the coffee table, the person who restores the furniture, the person who goes out and they restore a painting, or they restore perhaps a car to make it look like the original. There is a beautiful art to that, and there's a lot of work that goes into it. We got to remove the dents. Sometimes I'm just going to speak. I have no idea how to restore a painting. I know there's like some chemical processes that go through it and all that good stuff, but that's beyond me. I mean, a coffee table, I get it. You go through and you strip it down. Sometimes you got to do a little sanding, a little steam actually will help the wood raise from where the scratches are, stuff like that. So, but you can make the the table whole again, and you can make it look great. And then there's a car where we're gonna cut out the rust, and we're gonna replace some parts, and we're gonna do a lot of stuff here and make sure that it's up and running. But not only is it up and running, we're gonna paint it to where it was. We're gonna get the interior right. There's gonna be so much that we do with this car that it's gonna feel like the day it drove off the lot. So yes, that's one definition of restoration. Is just return it to its original status. Then there's this awesome definition of restoration, which it's the way I do it for sure. Now we're gonna see a mosquito on the screen. But yes, anyway, I promise I won't get distracted too much. I'll try not to. Maybe I shouldn't promise it, but yeah. Then this idea of restoration, and man, I wish I could pronounce this word, but I struggle with it so much, and I tried. I can't seem to get my tongue to work with my brain. But look it up. But the biblical definition of restoration is not just to bring it to its original status. It is to bring it to its original status and make it better. And that's kind of what I'm in love with. That's the idea that I'm in love with, is that there's a God that is so graceful and so loving that what He wants for me is to not just be restored to my original status, to what I was originally born to do. He wants to make me better. He wants to just improve upon what I was meant to be, and that's pretty huge. That's the way I've designed my house. Like that's kind of when you're a creative person, that's kind of the way you see things. It's, hey, we want to return things back to functionality, but also we want to make them better. Yes, I want to rebuild my house, but also I want to add in now. I want to go in there. I want to fix the wiring. I want the wiring to be sharp. I want it to look so good. I want it to be. I've been renovating my house, so yeah. So my wiring is like just so pressed up against the 2x4s. It's stapled in there properly. So it's all tacked in there, and it's just neat and proper, because it's the way I like things to be, are neat and proper, even though sometimes everything's really messy with me. You know, if I don't have the right systems in place, there's a lot of mess, and that's what I've been working on for the past few years, is how I stepped into a mess, and now God's gifted me this awesome time to come through and fix it, and I don't take it for granted, and I don't scoff at it at all. I love it. So yeah. So anyway, going back to restoration, like in the Garden of Eden, a lot of people would consider this the first promise of restoration. So, and I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt. I'm sorry. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise thy heel, or his heel. Right, talking about the serpent. So there's clearly, there is an opportunity there to separate ourselves, from pain, or from, there's an opportunity there to separate ourselves from what's ailing us, just right there in that moment. So yes, but even more so, this next portion that I want to talk about, it pertains to me. So sometimes when I read the Bible, I'm going to sit up here a little bit and readjust myself. There we go. Now I feel much more relaxed. I feel much better. I'm in my happy zone now. But anyway, yeah. So in the Bible, as I've been reading throughout my life, there are times where I see myself in each character, and I believe that's because this is the story of each and every one of us. These are our follies and our redemptive qualities, all in one awesome book that depicts our psychology. It's a history of us, and also it's a guide on how to. There's a lot of things in Western psychology that they don't even touch on. They don't even mess with the Bible. And not quite sure why, if it's just because it's not a one size fits all, if because there's different religions, but I mean, there's a lot of answers here, if you look at manifestation now, a lot of manifestors will use Bible scripture, biblio scripture, to justify their manifestations. Now, they don't work because they remove God from the equation. However, there's a lot of truth in what they're saying when it comes to the verse, if we look at the esoteric elements of it. So, and I'm always all about the deeper meaning. I've found the truth, but I know that there's always a little bit deeper in here that you can pull from, and it'll guide you. But again, it comes into the community, into the studying, into the understanding, and not relying on your own wisdom, but relying on your brothers and your sisters, and also your prayers. That's the biggest thing. Before I recorded this today, I actually recorded one earlier. I tried to record several, and I forgot to pray, and they all sucked, right? So I always talk about being raw and unfiltered, like punk rock and honey. But the reality is without prayer, there was no fruit. It's like I was spinning around in circles, like a one-legged man with a floaty. Just, right? So, do you love that demonstration? Anyway, yeah. So since Easter, the idea of restoration has been huge. It started with Psalm 51. When I first read the Psalms, I did not have a relationship with King David, and I honestly was kind of not wanting to either. I just wasn't really into him. Didn't really know the story of King David too well. Just know he was the dude who defeated Goliath, and he's the guy who he took Bathsheba and all that good stuff. Leonard Cohen wrote a song about him. That was about it. I didn't really know my King David story too well. So as I read the Psalms, I'm like, geez, this dude is so whiny, and this stuff is almost like pathetic to read. And then when you start learning about King David, you're like, whoa, this dude is like, he has a lot of fallacies, but also his redemptive qualities are amazing. The fact that he put himself in a position where he was even able to be redeemed, and he acknowledged he could be redeemed, and he truly did have a heart for God despite doing some pretty wretched stuff. That's huge, because there's a lot of times where people feel so guilty that they don't acknowledge that they are redeemable, that there are redemptive qualities to them, that they're beautifully and wonderfully made. There's this lie that people are garbage, or how many times you hear people say, I hate people. And why? You're a people. But I get it. I understand it, because we've all been classically, trained to believe this way now, especially in the past 20, 30 years. I know since I've been a kid, I've seen the news just totally make neighbors hate one another. I mean, and I love my mom to death, but I do know that my mom will talk to me about the news, and there are times where I have to be like, no. And she'll tell you the same thing, like, no, we're not talking about it. We're not talking about the obituaries today. I don't care what's going on in Chicago. They never seem to get it right anyway, so I don't care what's going on here in Northwest Indiana when it comes to politics, so long as there's civil liberties and people are not losing their rights. I'm okay. But then when I see people losing their rights, it's pretty much when I'll step in. But yes, which sometimes more than I like to step in, but I do when the time is right. I've actually recently done so. But yes. So moving on, I want to talk about Peter. He's the reason we have a church. Secondary to Jesus, obviously, and God. God and Jesus and the Holy Ghost. The Trinity. But Peter is such an important part of our faith, and we don't acknowledge it. And what's even more important, why we need to pay attention to Peter is just like us. He had his moments of doubt, and he had his moments of walking away, and Christ had to go get him and say, hey, whoa, where are you going? He was a mess, but in that mess, Jesus saw the foundation of the church. He said, that's why Simon became Peter. Simon Peter, he's the rock. People's eyebrows up for Simon Peter. Anyway, yeah. So, yes, gosh, I hope these jokes that are making me laugh are making you laugh, because, if you don't know who the rock is, you've been living under a rock. But also, if you don't know who the more important rock is, it's Simon Peter. So anyway, yes, but if you really think about it, there are a few times where he could have just walked away and been like, nope. But, his heart was moved to follow Jesus. But also, if we look at John's a pretty special book, the last of the four Gospels. And if we look at John 13, 18, and 21, these are pretty important chapters in our faith and the basis of our faith, right? Because 13, we got Jesus and he's washing everybody, and Peter's being a little outlandish, but we also know that Jesus is predicting the way he's going to die. He's kind of leading everybody up, and we also know that Jesus, he's prepping these guys, how it's all going to go down. And Peter's the one who's kind of like, well, then, hey, I don't need you to bathe my feet. Hey, if you're going to bathe my feet, then bathe my hair and my arms. And, and he's, hey, come on, man. Jesus is like, come on. You've had a bath today. We need to wash your feet, because not all of you is clean, So Jesus is washing with the feet of his disciples, and, he's preparing them. for the Last Supper and all that good stuff, right? But in the midst of this, Peter is being pretty charismatic with his faith, right? At least that's kind of the way I take it, is that Peter's a man who's pretty charismatic with his faith, and in this time he's like, hey Lord, I'm not leaving you, no way, there's no way I'll leave you. And then Jesus finally has revealed to Peter, hey, you're my number one, but before the rooster crows, you're going to deny me 3 times. And Peter's like, what? Get out of here. But it happens that way, doesn't it? Because if we go into John 18, we learn that Peter, as he's trying to get away from the bedlam that's going on that night, he denies it. He denies being in the garden. He denies being a follower. And he does it 3 times, and then on the 3rd time, the rooster crows. At that moment, the rooster crows. Then we have the resurrection. So between that time and we got the 3 days that Jesus was gone, after he was crucified. Jesus is out fishing, or no, Jesus is not out fishing. Peter's out fishing, and Jesus calls he and the other disciples that are fishing with him out, and has dinner prepared. They didn't question who the man was because they knew who it was, and when he called them out, there was, the spread was ready. And he talks with the disciples, but more importantly, he's talking to Peter, because Peter has a very important job to do, right? Because we know that Jesus is soon to ascend. So I'm gonna actually open this guy up. So yes, and there's actually something pretty cool I'll go on about when I'm done with this. So yeah, so we got John 21, and we're starting at verse 15. So when they had dined, Jesus saith to Simon Peter, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me more than these? He saith unto him, Yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee. He saith unto him, meaning Jesus says to Peter, feed my lambs. Then verse 16 of John 21. He saith to him again, the 2nd time, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me? He saith unto him, Yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee. He saith unto him, feed my sheep. Now we're on to 17. He saith unto him the 3rd time, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me? Peter was grieved, because he said unto him, Thou knowest all things, thou knowest that I love thee. Jesus saith unto him, feed my sheep. Now, the problem that a lot of people don't get here, again, this is why knowing our Bibles is so important, having our community is so important. The reason being is because this word love in these 3 verses are so important. So in our language, we have the word love, and that pretty much covers everything. Hey, do you love me? Yeah. And it can go for any context. Talking with your wife, baby, I love you. And she knows. Talk to your brother, your friend, hey, I love you, man. If you're like me and you got friends, hey, I love you, bro. I tell my friends all the time, I love them, man. Because I know that there's just going to be a time where I won't get the opportunity to do that again. I've lost the best friend of my life, man. And when I lost him, I was so fortunate that I got to tell him I love him. And because I think if I wouldn't have had that, I never would have had any type of closure. I would have been devastated for a lifetime. So the greatest gift that God gave me was the ability to tell my brother that I love him. So let's talk about this word love, because it has so many connotations and we only have one word for it, right? So the word love in this, there's 2 words that are used. So there is the word love in Greek, which is agape. Agapeo is actually the word, the form of it, agapeo. And then there's the word philo, and phileas is kind of the word that we're using here, but so I don't mess that word up, I'm just going to say phileo, and that's a brotherly love. So agape is like supreme love, like that's the way that you describe your love for God, for your wife, your mother. That's the type of love that you have. Agape. Hey, I have agape love for you. I hold you in such high esteems. Then there's phileo, which is like my brotherly love. Like, hey man, phileo. Like I love you like a brother. You're like my best friend, dude. Like that would be how we explain it, but there's a simpler term just to say phileo. You know, Phileo fish. Kidding. But yes. Anyway, so I'm just gonna read this again. Okay. So Jesus saith, and I'm gonna kind of just speed it up here a little bit, right? So Jesus saith to Simon Peter, Simon, son of Jonas, agape thou me more than these. All right, and these I believe are referring to the fish that they caught. Peter was a fisherman by trade. He loved fishing, so that was kind of his jam. There are a lot of people who say that they believe it's the disciples, the other 11 brothers that he had. Man, I think it's fishing. If you like to go fishing, then you just know. You know that nothing is better than fishing. There's even a day of catching no fish and being skunked is like one of the best days on the planet. So yes. So I believe Jesus is saying, hey, do you love me more than these fish you caught? But there are other people who believe that it's the disciples. But I have a reason that I can back this up with, and it's not just what I just said. But yeah. So Jesus says, agapeo, thou more than these. Right? Peter replies back, yeah, Lord, thou knowest that I phileo thee. So he's saying, hey, do you love me in a supreme way? Now we're going back to 13, right? Because this is where Peter's like, man, agape. Whew, Jesus, agape, I got you. And then we got 18. Peter done messed up because he denied 3 times, even though he didn't really mess up. It is part of a bigger plan for him to mess up. And we're going to get to this, right? So, again, yeah, Lord, thou knowest that I phileo thee. I love you like a brother. So Jesus tells him, feed my lambs. Okay? Now we have the second time. Jesus asks him again, Simon, son of Jonas, agapeo thou me? All right, and then Peter says, yeah, Lord, thou knowest that I phileo thee. All right, once again, he's saying, I love you like a brother. And Jesus tells him, feed my sheep. So we go from lambs and we go from sheep. Now, 17. This is the big one, right? The third time, Jesus asks, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me? This is interesting, right? Because he's not saying, lovest thou me as in agape thou me, agapeo thou me. He's not using that word anymore. We're no longer talking about supreme love. Jesus comes down to Peter's level. Jesus uses the word, Simon, son of Jonas, phileos thou me, phileos thou me. And then Peter was grieved. And he said unto him the third time, Lord, you knowest all things. Thou knowest that I phileo thee. And then Jesus told him, feed my sheep. So sorry for the delay, I lost my spot. But, all right, so here's why this is so important. This whole part, right? Jesus knew in the moment when Peter was saying agape, agape, agape. He's saying, "Hey, I love you." In fact, if we go back to 13, Peter is resting upon Jesus' chest. He's resting on his chest. He's holding him. He's so charismatic in what he's doing. And it's not that it's fake. It's just that his zealousness or his ideals are a little misplaced, and Jesus knows this. At least this is the way that I interpret it, right? But now let's go to 17. Peter was grieved, right? Now the word grief is pretty amazing, right? Because if we go back and we look at it, and we're talking about what Peter did in 13 and then in 18, yeah, he's grieved because he knows he messed up. Even though it's part of the plan, he knows. Jesus knows. When I say he knows, Jesus knows, like, hey, this is what's going to happen. Peter still doesn't believe him. Peter doesn't have he doesn't have the faith yet. He has faith in his faith still, which is something that I've been dealing with and understanding. My faith was in my faith, and my faith was not in God. It was not in Jesus. My faith was in my faith of Jesus, if that makes sense. So, yeah, and I'll break it down here in a minute. But yeah, so, put yourself in those shoes. Let's look at the human element of this. Simon Peter is completely humiliated in this moment, as this is all happening. Fire's going, there's food ready, the fish are caught, Jesus helped them catch fish, and all those things happen. And in the most important moment, he couldn't grab onto Jesus. He couldn't take that faith. He couldn't pick up his faith. So he's humiliated as he's having to answer the Lord. But the Lord is so forgiving, right? Because the Lord is asking him, Jesus is asking him, after he asks him, "Do you agape me?" twice, Simon Peter has to be completely honest about the situation. He has to express his true emotions, and he has to pour himself out to Jesus. And he can't say agape, because if he says agape, he's a liar, and he's a dead to rights liar. And not only would Jesus know that he'd be a liar, the other disciples would know that he's a liar. More importantly, if you know Peter's characteristics, if you go through, Peter would know he's a liar, because Peter was a pretty accountable guy. He was very charismatic with some things, but at the same time, he was a tradesman. So there was a lot of honor in keeping his word, and doing the things that he needed to do. So the psychology there is what's so interesting to me, because again, there's this humility in Peter now. So the first time in 15, we got, and again, I'm not trying to teach you guys anything. I'm just processing this out loud because I found this so interesting as I was going through my studies. So 15, he's saying, "Feed my lambs." So he's starting off with the disciples. Hey, feed the disciples, feed your brothers. They're my lambs. So that word lamb is actually used in the same connotation when we're talking about the Lamb of God, believe it or not. So, don't believe me, go in and do your research. This is where I challenge you to go read the Bible and look at this word lamb. So the way he's describing lambs is he's describing them as lambs of God, the same way he's been described. So it's pretty interesting. So he says, "Feed my lambs." And then the other two times he's being told, "Feed my sheep." So feed the flock. So feed the lambs, feed the flock, feed the sheep. And this is what's pretty amazing, right? Because this is where Peter is slowly being restored. So, and he's being restored through his own humility, his own honesty, and he's having a come to Jesus moment, if you will. And I think this is pretty awesome, because if we really, I found it in here, so I'm a human just like you guys. So if I found the issue, I know you're going to find it in your heart. How many times do we deny God before we wake up? How many times have you denied Jesus before the rooster even crowed. And I know I do it all the time. In fact, um, there was this really awesome moment where I was these awesome months where I was waking up, and every morning I woke up and I said, God, I love you. God, I love you. Thank you for another day. Like my phone would ring. I would not look on my phone. I wouldn't play around with it. Wouldn't fiddle with anything. I'd say, God, I love you. It'd be the first words out of my mouth, you know. And there was probably a little charismatic worship in that, because those truly aren't my first thoughts. It was me pushing myself to do it, which, you know, where's genuine love when you push yourself to do something, right? Now, I genuinely love God. However, my first thought in the morning typically isn't for God. However, comma, we do train our brains to do that, right? So what I want to do is when I wake up in the morning, I want to acknowledge God first thing. So, you know, taking that time out of my day to give myself the moment to wake up and not either look at my phone, which is, you know, sometimes an idol in my life, which I have to toss out of the way to get away from me. Um, you know, so I have to, you know, every morning I wake up and I have to choose: am I going to look at my stupid phone, or am I going to say, God, I love you, you know? And the answer should be probably neither. I should wake up, breathe, and then get into prayer, right? Give myself a moment to be honest, to be true with the Lord, and just have that honest communication, and not the communication out of so how do I want to word this? That communication with God out of thinking that I must do it. That's not that's not the type of man I want to be in my walk with God. So I want my walk with God and my relationship with God to be purely honest. You know, so that's kind of where I'm at. You know, and the beautiful thing about all this is that you know, there's this act of restoration every morning. There is an act of restoration, right? We're not trying to have yesterday 2.0. We're trying to have today, right? We're trying to have today in a beautiful way with God, and just knowing who we are in God, and starting from the ground running, feeling like you have to be militant with it, is probably not the best way to start your day with God. And I understand some people need dogmatic worship. And I think there is a time for dogmatic worship, especially when you are just struggling. It's okay to do repetitive prayers. My church, I don't know. There are some times where I don't agree with the messages in my church, and with the, you know, we don't really technically have doctrines, but we do have fundamentals. We have 28 of them, because our goal is to be biblical Christians. And I'm all about that. I love being a biblical Christian over being somebody who follows a doctrine. You know, there's more freedom in being a biblical Christian and understanding what my walk looks like. Um, so, you know, I want to be a biblical Christian, but also I want to be an honest Christian, and I want my romantic, passionate love affair with Jesus Christ to be authentic and to be true. You know, I want it to be uh, me and God, you know, and I want that to be my pillar of my life, you know, and then everything else can be, you know, built upon that foundation. And that means my relationships, all that other stuff, can be built upon me. You know, they can be built upon after I build upon my time with God. And you know, it's a beautiful way to start your day. That's how I love to start my days. Sometimes I miss the mark, you know, but you know, I love to invite Jesus into my day, because when I do, I find that my fruits. And it's this is going to sound so terrible, but I do find that the fruits that I go out and seek are abundant. You know, there are times where when I invite Jesus into my day first thing in the morning, I take a little bit of time and just say some prayer and I'm just being honest with myself and with the Lord and who I am today. It gives me the opportunity to not have a Groundhog's Day, first of all, but also just gives me the opportunity to understand where I am emotionally, to understand where my body is, to just have that beautiful blank canvas to paint another day with. So yes, and one of my one of my favorite verses when I got fired, um, you know, I like I said, I had a huge position and a lot of responsibility. And when I got fired, I didn't grieve. I didn't care. I couldn't have been more elated. Uh, I honestly, like, I was just like, wow, this is the best thing to happen to me right now, because I knew there were just things that I wasn't going to agree with moving forward, and it was going to jeopardize and compromise my soul. And I think that the person who I was probably would have went with it. I probably would have taken the compromise versus the man that I was becoming in Christ. The best thing that ever happened to me was returning to the church, God putting a beautiful woman in my life to help me be less afraid to walk into it. Um, you know, so that was one of the best things that could have happened to me. Um, and here I am, and I get this opportunity to be restored. And even restoration, we got to be careful when we look at what we think restoration is, because when I started this off, I was like, I know God will bring me back to another job where I'm making six figures, and I'm leading people, and I'm doing this and I'm doing the other. And once I sat down with it, I was like, you know what? That's not. I don't think that's what restoration looks like for me. I mean, there may be a chance that I find another job where I'm doing whatever, and I'm making that money again. That, hey, wouldn't mind it. I like making six figures a year, for sure. But also, that there's a price that comes with that. There's a responsibility that comes with that. Um, there is a sacrifice that comes with it, because you lose a little bit of yourself when you do it, and it deviates away from your spirituality. There's a lot of sacrifice that has to be made to do something like that. And I don't know if I am interested in sacrificing my spirituality. And again, I've turned down some pretty awesome job opportunities, because I can't practice the Sabbath. I made it incredibly known that I'm a Sabbath keeper, and that is my primary goal in life, is to be able to keep the Sabbath, and I won't compromise. I will do 1,000 side hustles before I go back and be put in a situation where I am told, hey, you can't honor Sabbath. No, thank you. But yeah, so I talked about this in one of the last podcasts I did, and it's the book of Jeremiah in chapter 29. A lot of people use Jeremiah 29:11, and they make it an interpersonal. Uh, they make it interpersonal for themselves. However, what we need to acknowledge from this is that, again, like I talked about the last time, it is about a nation being restored. It can definitely play into you and yourself, but it's so important to know what the history is and what the context is, and it's about the Lord rising Israel out of Babylonian captivity. And in our lives, we have to make the choice: are we going to be part of spiritual Israel, or are we going to be part of spiritual Babylon? Are we going to be part of the world that devalues us, that depreciates us, that only seeks out pleasure? Um, you know, the Lord, Jesus tells us to go out and live life abundantly. What he doesn't say is to live life indulgently, right? I talk about this because I'm an addict. I'm all about indulgence. And stepping away from indulgence has been awesome. It's been a key for weight loss. It's been a key for health, for mental clarity. Um, and I know you can say, well, the Buddha and all these guys talk about it too, but yeah, but I mean, nobody drives a home like Jesus. And with that being said, I want to talk about Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace and not evil, to give you an expected end. This is out of the King James Version, because there are some versions that are a little bit more straight to the point. That's a little bit poetic. But yes, the Lord knows what his plans for us are, and it's our choice to choose them. So every day we have this helmsman who's operating the ship and allows us to be the captain, who makes the calls of where we're going to go. And it's pretty huge to know that we have that kind of freedom, and it comes with a cost. It comes with knowing ourselves and knowing who we are, and it also comes with, the growth, the factor. How are we going to grow? How are we going to do all these things to make our lives beautiful? So, yes. Now let's go back to the one point that I forgot to make. I'm at an hour. I meant for this to be like 20 minutes, so I must have had a lot to talk about. I guess it has been a while. So the one point that I had to make when they said, in this verse in John 21:15, says, do you agape me more than these? So one thing they talked about is 153 fish, and I kind of did not go into the rabbit hole of 153. I didn't do the numerology or anything like that based on it. I didn't try to add up the numbers and see where it went, where it took me, because I didn't care about that. A lot of people say, Jesus is talking about the disciples. I thoroughly disagree with those people. They're scholars and all that stuff, but I think scholars sometimes miss the point, which is perfectly put. Again, Simon Peter loved to fish. And if you fish, there's no better feeling than getting the fight. When I like fishing for bass, right? So I'll tell you about it. So I cast out. I'm a master caster. I'm not a good fisherman, but I can cast that pole like nobody's business. So I take it, whip it out, and I'm reeling in, right? And then boom, I get that bite. There's something in that bite. Your heart, it explodes. There's joy, right? You get this euphoric feeling, and it's I can't even explain it. It's so amazing. It's so much fun. And then you got the fight, right? And you got the bass, and he's not wanting to come in, and you're going to get him. And so now you're playing, right? You're going back and forth. You're doing all these things, and you're trying. I'm sorry, I'm envisioning myself. You could tell fishing is so awesome because even as I'm explaining it, I'm loving it, right? I'm doing my motions. So anyway, yes. So there's no better feeling than catching a fish. And there's, even when you don't catch a fish, there's no better feeling than just standing at the lake on the shore of it and popping the line right into the water, right? So, yes, here's where I believe he was talking about. Do you love me more than these, the fish? Do you love me? Do you agape me more than fishing? I think that's the question. And I think it gets overcomplicated. But if you've ever been fishing, it's amazing, right? And, the other thing about why fishing is so important, there's a reason why we use the fish to describe Jesus. It's not just about the fishes and loaves. We're fishers of men. And if you know anything about fishing, you know that there are so many different lures out there, and we're always trying to figure out what lure are we going to use to catch that fish. Some days we're going to get skunked. Our ministry is going to be bad. We're going to go out there. We're going to stink up the place. Nothing's going to happen. Other days, we're just going to keep piling them in, especially here in the next coming month. The winter's actually been pretty perfect. The weather's going well. It's a little cold, but the spawn should be right on cue. If you know anything about fishing, the spawn is the best time to go out catching. They're going to be closer to the banks. So you're gonna get all those bass and all that stuff, and then you're gonna get the big bass. You know, they're close, they're by the eggs and all that stuff. Then you're gonna get you're gonna get the bluegill, all that stuff that's gonna be coming in. But again, if you know anything about fishing, you know that fishing is all about using the right lure. It's all about using the right tactics in the right places. It's all about lining up your hook. So when you're fishing, you're going weedless, because if not, what happens if you just throw your plastic on there, your worm or whatever, you toss it in? What's gonna happen? You're probably gonna catch some weeds before you catch some fish. You're gonna be doing some lake landscaping. You know, you're not gonna be catching anything. So yes, you know, when we go out there and we fish, we have to remember that we are trying to catch fish. If we want to equate our brethren and our sisters to that, you know, we're going out there and we're trying to catch as many fish as possible, because there's no better feeling. And then to know that we get to give it to God, it's our presence to God, like, hey, got another one for you, Lord, take care of them. You know, that's where we want to be. So yes. Anyway, it's now my Sabbath. I'm going to upload this video because I'm completely satisfied with it. I love the time that I got to share with you today, and you know what I want to pray that we understand that Yahweh is the God of restoration. You know, I believe in the God of restoration. This is something I tell myself every day. You know, I believe in the God of restoration. Yahweh is the God of restoration. And one of the best verses in the Bible about restoration is Psalm 51. One thing that I wake up every morning, and you know, when my alarm clock goes off, I have it set to a picture, and the picture reads, "Create in me a new heart." Again, every day is a beautiful blank canvas. Every day is a new day to renew your heart. Not every day is going to be a day for the Lord, but man, when they are the day for the Lord, when you have those days where you're just on fire and you're hitting it right, you know how awesome it is. So yeah. So with that being said, you know, I give you love, and I hope that you go out there and you guys rock and roll and just have a great time. You know, God bless you. You know, pray that I just pray for your health, your happiness, your wisdom, and that you find joy in all these things. You know, in all the things you do, that you find joy. So yes, you're awesome.